Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Shift Happens F1 podcast. I'm Alayna, and let's get right into this. The Baku Grand Prix was this past weekend, and I'm going to be honest with you, I really thought this was going to turn out differently. Don't get me wrong, I love this race. Baku decided to, at the legitimate last minute, deliver some juicy drama, but my baby boy, my one and only, Charles, did not win, and Carlos got crushed out by Perez. So kind of a disappointing race compared to what we thought would happen after qualifying on Saturday, but you know, second place is second place. Wasn't a lot of points for Ferrari, but you know, it is what it is. Also, gonna talk about this now. I am currently sick with some sinus and congestion issues, so I apologize for sounding a little nasally, a little congested. You're gonna have to listen to that, so just a fair warning. So I don't normally talk about qualifying as of late on the podcast, but since we've had a couple new drivers as of late, I thought that we should mention them, especially because they shook up the qualifying rounds. So, Franco Colapinto, who will be driving for Williams for the rest of the season, managed to, I don't know, somehow qualify his Williams ahead of Albon in, Baku. And it was one of those things where we said, oh, they were good at Monza because everybody's good at Monza. Well, the Williams was really good at Baku this weekend, and it was definitely a good surprise to see the team have a really good car this weekend and to be getting points because they got points. And Franco Colapinto definitely helped the team with their chances by placing so well and high during qualifying. On the other side of that, we had Oliver Behrman, who also outqualified his teammate, putting himself into P11 for the start of the Grand Prix compared to Hulkenberg's P13. He was in place for Kevin Magnussen after Kevin Magnussen got his race ban in Monza. So this is the only time we will see Oliver Behrman for the rest of the season, but he did an outstanding job in qualifying, also in the race this weekend. We saw Charles placing himself into pole, as he's done for many years around this track. He knows this track, he's super speedy in this track, and he's also a little gutsy around this track. I mean, we saw him lock up and bend it into the side of the wall in free practice earlier this week, so it's definitely a track that he knows super well, but he's also really aggressive around it, and it can be, you go a little too far over the line and you're in the wall. So it's definitely one of those things where you have to be a little vigilant. And then another shocking performance was Sergio Perez outqualifying Max Verstappen. Sergio Perez put himself into P4 and Max into P6, which honestly, it was one of those things where you're like, hold on, did he really just do that? Or is Max Verstappen falling off? Like, what's happening? Is this just a one-off weird thing? No, I mean, like, Perez was really quick and speedy this weekend. I think he would have finished third or fourth had Carlos and Perez not crashed into each other at the end of the race this weekend. But it is what it is. But it definitely is a really good step towards moving forward for him, especially with all of the drama that's kind of been as of late of like, why is he still there? Like, is he not good enough anymore? Is Red Bull going to kick him out? Like, because not living up to the standards that Red Bull is, but at the same time, Red Bull hasn't been living up to their own standards. So it's definitely, I think Red Bull's like alarm bells are going off a little bit right now. And so they're like freaking out. And I think that this was supposed to be a really good weekend for them. And I think Sergio had really good pace and it was going to be a good result, had they not crashed out. Now let's get into the main chunk of this podcast, the race review. We'll start off with a well done to Oscar Piastri for that move on Charles because it was a great move. And then I thought, oh, okay, we have some good racing. Charles will come back. And then I said that to myself every single lap until the end of the race, and Charles had not overtaken Oscar. Every lap, it looked like, oh, he's going to do it. Nope, he's too far. Like, he'll come back. Like, and it just kept repeating itself legitimately for like 30 plus laps. Charles just could not seem to get within 5 to 6 tenths of a second between Oscar, and it just kept him out of reach unless, Charles just decided to make like a yeet towards the inside of the corner and just like pray that he didn't crash out. But that's a little too crazy, and I don't think Charles, even if he is super gutsy and knows the track super well, I think the last thing he really wants to do is crash out his car, and I think that the move just didn't come to him. But I also think that this is something that will show Oscar's drivability and how he has progressed so much in the past year, because he was so good with his tires this race. And we all know that's what he really struggled with last year, was his tire management. And was what McLaren had said over the radio many times last year was, hey, you got to keep your tires on check. Like, please don't drag them out, stuff like that. And I think that he's shown really good progress and knows how to keep his tires from degrading and knows how to control them now. I think in the past couple races, he's really shown that skill and that ability. And I think that it's going to definitely help him be aggressive and show that, show McLaren, like, he is not just this like rookie coming into the season now. Like, he's been here, he knows how to drive the car, like he is a good driver, he wins races. So I think that it's definitely going to add into the conversation that McLaren will definitely be having soon, possibly. And I mean, Oscar and that McLaren had great pace, and Charles too, and to the point where I thought that, or they had around the same pace, but Oscar had better tire management this race, much better than Charles did, because and I feel like that isn't something we normally see with Charles, is like bad tire management, because he's normally pretty decent at it. But when you think about the fact that he sat behind Oscar in dirty air for 30 plus laps, just trying to get DRS, just trying to make it into that 5 or 6 tenths second behind him so he could dive bomb into the corner, I think it just ate up at his tires, because at the end of the race, we were just seeing him lose so much time to the point where like Perez and Carlos were getting super close to Charles, and it looked like he may get overtaken until, the unfortunate incident happened. But I think that was kind of how I think that's the reason why we saw Charles' tires go off, was because he was in such dirty air and Oscar had clean air. So I think if the roles were reversed, we would have seen the same thing, just, switch the drivers into place. But I mean, his tires really just fell off at the end of the race. And so I think it was one of those things where Charles really needed to make that move super early in the race, and it just never happened. And Oscar just decided to put his shades on, keep a cool and calm, collected posture, and just drive and, kind of screw papaya rolls essentially. And he was just going to win his race. And then, like I said, it's also something that's going to spark up more conversations in McLaren about who's going to be considered the quote unquote number one driver. I mean, because we all know Lando is number one and Oscar is two. But with the performance each driver has been putting out, it's safe to say that there probably have been whispers of talks or of having a meeting next year, sitting down and figuring out, will there even be a quote unquote number one driver next year, or will both drivers technically be on that even playing field where they say, like, oh, both of our drivers are kind of like our number one. We're not going to choose one more than the other. But then I think that's going to get a little crazy, because Lando's been with McLaren legitimately his entire F1 career, and that's been years now. Oscar's only been in this car for what? A year, 2 years max, year max. Like, it's one of those things where he hasn't been in the car that long, but he is outperforming Lando right now. And it's kind of crazy to see. Now, Lando definitely got shafted this weekend with qualifying. It just did not end up well in their favor. He qualified like P16, so that was not a good start for them anyways. We all knew that this was going to be a recovery drive for Lando, and I think Lando did actually a phenomenal job of bringing himself back up and into the points. But it was not Lando's weekend after qualifying. It was definitely going to be Oscar's weekend, technically, with the team, and just to win and get the most points for the team to move up ahead on the constructors championship, because they are currently leading. And I think that they know that they can win this if they keep this pace going, and if they can get their ducks in order and stuff like that, and understand where they are as a team, and get their crap together. Because Red Bulls, I don't know what Red Bulls doing. I think alarm bells, like I said, alarm bells are going off in Christian Horner's office room. So because now that we're seeing other drivers and other cars getting up to the top pace or being the fastest around different tracks, this could definitely create some contention in the drivers championship battle, even more so in the constructors, because right now, like I said, McLaren's leading and Red Bull's in second. But if Red Bull continued to have this poor performance, they could end up third or fourth. No, they could end up third. I don't think they'll end up fourth. Mercedes isn't that close to them, and I think Ferrari and McLaren are going to be the top two contenders for Red Bull and keeping um, the drivers' championship or the constructors' championship at the end of the season. I mean, we only have a couple more races left. I think it's like 7 or something like that. And I mean, you have to say it's definitely looking like this is going to be maybe a three-way battle at this point, because Ferrari is definitely showing up at this point and they're catching up to the McLaren's pace, because Max still has a 60-point lead from Lando in the so in the drivers constructors and the drivers championship. So in the Drivers' Championship, Max still has a 60-point lead from Lando in second place, but then Charles is only 20 points behind Lando, and then Piastri is 10 points behind Charles. So with all these different drivers winning and being the top dog every week, instead of every single driver or team taking chunks out of Max's lead, we're seeing multiple different drivers slowly creeping their way. So it's seeing less of the sense of like, oh, who's going to take Max Verstappen's spot, and more so of like, hey, if we're seeing different racers every week win, which is amazing, and you know, the top thing that every F1 fan wants to see. We want to see different drivers and we want to see it. It's just like, oh man, like it's happening a little too late in the season, where if all these drivers just keep taking small chunks out of each other or out of Max, we're not seeing someone who's maybe going to be able to get high enough or get enough points to kind of go after Max, essentially. Because like I said, we're running out of races, and for this to possibly end up as a 2 to 3 or even a 4 driver battle for the championship, which, like I mentioned before, I would personally love to see. For the past years, I feel like it's just been, you know, Max winning or Max and Lewis, and then even before that it was just Lewis winning, and then even before that it was Lewis and Nico. So it's always kind of been a one driver domination or a 1-2 driver domination. And I think if we got to see, you know, 2 or 3 or even 4, I think it would really make the season kind of spectacular. And I'm actually quite excited and happy that we are not going to have these regulation changes at the end of this year, but rather at the end of next year, because with how the teams are upgrading their cars, it's looking for, like, for the first time in a long time, that we're going to have multiple cars who are at the same level, or, you know, one car who's at another level one weekend and then they fall back behind. So it's definitely going to be, I feel like we're going to get to see more of the old school racing, where like one car doesn't really dominate and it's kind of different every week. And I want to see that versatility in the winners and stuff like that. And we've had so many winners so far this season, and I think it's amazing. And you know, it just makes everything so much more exciting and nerve-wracking and unpredictable. Now, let's talk about the Carlos Checo crash, because boy, did this ruin the podium for me. Now, the FIA have declared that it's a racing incident, and personally, I think that's a fair judgment. I think Perez is maybe a bit more at fault with this, because after I looked at all the onboards, you know, from F1 TV and Twitter and stuff like that, I think Perez had a better vantage point of how close him and Carlos were after they went into the corner there. And I think that, you know, they both were just going to be super aggressive and they were going to keep going, hoping that the other person would get scared and pull back. And you know, neither did. And then this was just the result, because I don't even think that they had a huge touch. I think it was legitimately like the smallest of tire taps, because we've seen like cars tap tires before and it did not end up in the result of what we had on Sunday. But it was just the result that we had anyways, and they ended up in the wall, and it ruined both of their races, which both of them were doing a phenomenal job. Perez was doing absolutely amazing. I mean, he was outpacing Max Verstappen. He outqualified him. Carlos was doing well. He was pulling up on the ranks. It was going to maybe look like it was going to be a 2-3 for Ferrari on the podium. It was going to be really good points for them. And then just, you know, race over for them with one lap to go. And I kind of talked about it before too. Like, I think had Checo not crashed, I think he would have been very happy with the possible podium or the fourth place, because he would have finished ahead of Max, like I said. And I think that would have been a huge boost in his mentality and in his mind, because, with everyone calling him washed and other things, and I definitely haven't called him like something like that before. Hee hee ha ha. So sorry, but I still think there are other drivers who would do just as well in Checo's seat. But seriously, put aside, past performances and stuff like that, he did a great job, and I think Red Bull would have really appreciated the 3-4 finish, especially with Adrian Newey leaving to go to Aston Martin. Once again, like I said, alarm bells going off right now at Red Bull. So let's go into that for a minute, because I haven't really touched that. But I wonder what made him go to Aston Martin, because it definitely wasn't the large salary he'll be receiving every single year from now on. 30 million euros, including bonuses and in shares within the company. I wonder what made him go there instead of Maranello. I think Ferrari spent all of their budget money on Lewis Hamilton, and then freaked out when Adrian Newey said that he would be leaving, and then they were like, well, crap, we spent all our budget on Lewis, so can't compete with Daddy Warbucks over there in Aston Martin. I still think that's so funny. I don't think Lance Stroll will literally ever lose his seat until he's like decided to be done, and who knows what will happen to the team then. Okay, so I'm going to go back into Colapinto and Behrman, because I talked about their qualifying performance, but I want to talk about their race performance, because they did a phenomenal job, Colapinto and Behrman, this weekend, because wow. I mean, they showed incredible pace for the cars they were driving, Williams and a Haas, and especially Baku being a very technical and very hard track. They did very well. Personally, I feel like um, they showed that they have a lot of potential, and I think it's going to be really good to see Oliver Behrman in that Haas next year. But it's sad that we're not going to see Colapinto possibly in F1 next year, because he's only raced twice in Formula One, and he's scored points both times. He scored 4 points so far, and he's raced twice, and he finished P8 behind Albon and Williams in Baku. Do you know how good of a race he drove? Like, it's probably the best decision Williams has made in a long time. And as much as that hurts to say as a Logan Sargent fan, it is the truth. And like I said, it's so sad to see that this kid doesn't have a seat in F1 next year. So he'll either just go back to F2 or be a reserve driver for Williams, because he's currently one of their development drivers. But I mean, the only open spot that I know of possibly is Sauber next to Hulkenberg. But also at the same time, like, no one really knows. Sauber could have possibly already signed someone, and they're just not releasing it to the public yet, or they're going to release it later, or possibly Sauber saw him and they're like, hey, this kid can drive, and it's in a Williams, and he's getting points, and he's out qualifying Albon in a Williams. Let's get this kid. So, like, it's one of those things where we really don't know what's kind of happening. We don't know if he'll have a seat. We don't know if if he's in talks with other teams or anything like that. But um, I think we're definitely going to be possibly going into an era where we have a lot of very talented F2 drivers, but not enough spots in F1 for them to show off their skills and their performances in top performing cars. Um, Lance Stroll needs to get out of that seat, preferably, please. I mean, put Franco Colapinto next to Fernando Alonso. I think you have a really good lineup there. So, Lawrence Stroll, if you ever want to make a really good decision for your team, kick out your son, put in Franco Colapinto. And I mean, Oliver Behrman finished ahead of Hulkenberg too, which is crazy in my opinion, and he got points for the team. So I mean, like, he really has been showing his skill in the car, and I think Haas are going to be very happy with the fact that they've signed him for next year and that he's going to be in that seat. So I think they're quite happy with the decision they made, and that it's going to be good for them next year. All right, now let's get into the race results. P1 was Piastri, P2 was Leclerc, P3 was Russell, P4 was Norris, P5 was Verstappen, P6 was Alonso, P7 was Albon, P8 was Colapinto, P9 was Hamilton, P10 was Behrman, P11 was Hulkenberg, P12 Gasly, P13 Ricardo, P14 Zhou, P15 Ocon, P16 Bottas, DNF for Sainz, DNF for Perez, DNF for Stroll, and a DNF for Tsunoda. And then finally, the constructor standings, and I will give you the point totals right now and where they're at. So McLaren is first with 476 points, and then right behind them, 20 points below, is Red Bull with 456. We have third with Ferrari, 425. Fourth, Mercedes with 309. Fifth, Aston Martin with 82. 6, RB with 34. 7, Haas with 29. 8, Williams with 16. And 9, Alpine with 13. And then finally, Kick Sauber still with 0 points. And I mean, when I said like we could possibly have a constructors title like championship in battle, I like seriously meant it, because McLaren and Ferrari are only 50 points apart from each other, and then Red Bull's like smack dab in the middle of them. So I definitely think, if one team has a bad weekend and one of their drivers crashes out, like we saw with Ferrari and Red Bull, like that's how McLaren got so far ahead, was because Carlos and Checo both crashed out. We would have seen a much closer title battle actually right now, and these scores would be a little different. So I'm very excited to see how this is all going to play out. I think it's going to be a very good end of the season. So, the Singapore Grand Prix is this weekend from the 20th to the 22nd of September, meaning we only have 7 races left in the season. And with what's been served to us this season, I think that means we could have a very, very interesting end of season coming our way. I realize I just said season like 3 or 4 times, so apologies for that. But Singapore Grand Prix is at Marina Bay Circuit. It's 62 laps, 3 miles long. I did convert from the kilometers to the miles. I think it's like 4.3 something, 4.6 something kilometers, but I like to know in miles because I'm American, so makes sense. And then it's a super bumpy track that's normally really physically demanding, not only on the drivers, but the cars. So we normally see some interesting action going on. Last year, there were 4 DNFs in the Singapore Grand Prix. And then also last year's podium was Carlos Sainz, Lando Norris, and Lewis Hamilton. So we'll see. Maybe this is going to be a repeat of that kind of podium, maybe in a different format. Maybe Lando, Carlos, Lewis, maybe Lewis, Carlos, Lando. We're never going to know. Maybe it's going to be a Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. Like, who knows? At this point, who knows? Because you would think Max Verstappen would be on the podium every week. It's been a long, long time since we've heard that Dutch national anthem, and I gotta be honest with you, life's been pretty good. So I can't complain about having different race drivers win. I'm not the biggest Max Verstappen fan, so life's been pretty good. And apologies for this coming out late. I am currently, like I mentioned last week, I am in Florence now for study abroad, so time has been getting away from me. I was actually in Turin and Langhe this weekend with FSU, so I was actually watching the race while I was on an excursion with my school. So funnily enough, things are going to be a little wonky with the release schedule, so apologies for getting it out now. I haven't had time this weekend to record. I'm actually doing this at like 2 in the morning, so hopefully that this will be out for y'all. And yeah. Thank you for listening to the Shift Happens F1 podcast. Stay tuned for Formula One news and more episodes coming around. Have a lovely week, guys. Bye.